Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are recording on Friday, October 10th. It's going to be showing tomorrow, October 11th. Shabbat Shalom, Moedim L'Simcha. So, dear colleagues, we are living right now for the first time in 2 years, for the first time since October 7th, 23, in a moment of deeper hope. The Knesset, of course, approved the President Trump's 20-point peace plan. And now both Israel is on the clock for phase one of its commitments, and Hamas is on the clock for its commitments, namely to return the 20 living hostages. And there's just a great sense of expectancy and hope in Israel. And so the question that we're going to be posing in light of that reality is, how do you move from a chapter that is dark, violent, chaotic, depressing, claustrophobic, to a better time? So many of us over the last 2 years sent emails or received emails with the closing line of praying for better times, praying for better times, praying for better times. And if that is ever going to be answered, this feels like the moment, praying for better times, when the last of the hostages, living hostages, are going to be returned, and the remains of the 28 who need to be found are also going to be returned, and the war is going to be over at last. That's the praying for better times. And the question is, how do you move from one reality to another, from the flood to the post-flood, from the war to the post-war? And that is one of the Torah's earliest questions with Noah. Noah's in the ark, depending on how you count it, 40 days and 40 nights, or 150 days and 150 nights, but a long time of rain and violence and death. And then he needs to emerge into a post-flood world. And we're going to see what the raven and the doves tell us about our own reality. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'b'fi amcha be'Yisrael. V'nihya anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha be'Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lamdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So I want to just jump into our content on Genesis chapter 11. Just a note to the file, or a footnote. You're going to see something that has just always confused me about the Noah story, which is the simple question: how long did it rain? How long was the flood? And there's actually two answers. There's 40 days and 150 days. And I never really understood that until reading Richard Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible. And he points out, and actually Richard Friedman, this scholar who talks about the different sources, uses this specific question: is it 40 days, is it 150 days, as a signal example of what it means to have different traditions weave together. So you have both of them. In any event, I'm just going to read this and then ask what comes up for you as you read this, thinking about our moment now. And when the waters had swelled on the earth for 150 days, God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to blow across the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were stopped up, and the rain from the sky was held back. The waters then receded steadily from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters diminished, so that in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The waters went on diminishing until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out the raven. It went to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out the dove to see whether the waters had decreased from the surface of the ground. But the dove could not find a resting place for its foot, and returned to him on the ark, for there was water all over the earth. So putting out his hand, he took it into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came back to him towards evening, and there in its bill was a plucked-off olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the waters had decreased on the earth. He waited still another 7 days, and sent the dove forth, and it did not return to him any more. So, how do you go from flood to post-flood? You go with a raven, and then you go with a dove for 7 days, and then you go with a dove a second time for 7 days, and then you go with a dove a third time for 7 days. Colleagues, what is the meaning of this story, the meaning of the raven, the meaning of thrice sending out the dove, in terms of moving from one reality to a better reality?
Okay. It's what fascinates me is that the raven was only sent out once, and that the raven never returned. So, logically, you would think, well, if the raven didn't return, maybe the raven found a spot to nest or whatever. So that's kind of weird. And just the idea that the AI commentary was so interesting. Saying that the reason the raven didn't come back is because it found all this, carrion and disgusting stuff to eat,
Right.
and was fine, which then paints this picture right away of the evil which we often associate the raven. It's black, it makes a horrible sound, it's kind of frightening, so that actually paints that picture right away. And that the dove
the dove is more loyal than the dove, comes
right,
back
and the dove gets sent out
give you a report.
three times and comes back. So that was actually sort of an interesting take on that. The AI was very interesting. Commentary.
Right, and what's known is that a raven feasts on, it's a predator, and it feasts on dead animals.
Yeah.
And the idea is that there's so many dead animals floating around in the waters that the raven was just had a whole world of feasting and never came back.
For him.
It was collation, right? Extreme collation.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for bringing this up, because I've never actually spent a lot of time with this, but there's some fascinating rabbinic commentary in Midrashim on this, including that the Mea Shiloach says that the raven is like an embodiment of Noach's anger, and he's sending it off of the ark, trying to get it away because the whole world has been destroyed, and he thinks there's just nothing but evil to be there, and he pins all that evil onto the raven.
Kind of like last week, what Aaron does with the goat that goes off to Azazel. Put all the sins of the Israelite people on the goat and send them off into the wilderness. All of Noah's anger goes onto this raven and sends it off.
Yeah, and that actually is counterproductive for Noah, because of course we know where Noah winds up after the flood, in a drunken stupor, cursing his son, and that idea that you could just get, label something as entirely evil and then get rid of it is a fallacy inherent in our human spirit that we need to confront. And the question that comes up through, actually, the Talmud has this incredible conversation about the raven versus Noach, and the raven accuses Noach of trying to send him off to get rid of him, when the raven is one of only two, because for the non-kosher animals you only have two of them, and then for the kosher animals you have 7. So the raven comes back and says, like, why are you trying to get rid of my kind? This isn't okay. My wife is here on this ship. And he actually, in the Talmudic voice, it's very weird, accuses Noach of trying to keep the wife and all of that. But this is so fascinating, because the Talmudic rabbis are giving a voice to something that we assume is evil, and trying to help us see that there's so much more nuance. It turns out that the raven is actually a incredibly monogamous, loving partner to his spouse there, the spouse raven. And that's something that Noah can't see. He's thinking only in
Michelle,
evil and good.
The laws of kashrut didn't exist in those days.
Well, it's a little retro from the Talmudic rabbis,
Michelle, Thank you for bringing all these references. Can I just zoom out for a second? What do you think is the pshat of the Torah when it offers us? We have to go from the flood to post-flood, and we go via a raven who doesn't come back, and and then the dove 3 times. What is the pshat of all that from your point of view?
That's an interesting question too. I mean, you opened by speaking about the 150 days versus the 40. I think you can resolve that tension by saying 40 days it was actively raining.
Okay.
150 days is the time, sort of in between.
Okay.
But even the Hebrew here of the question in the Torah of what does it mean? Does the raven not come back? What does it mean to vayetze, right? Veshov here. And like to go out and like shov is to return, which could mean here, he just goes here and there and never comes back. Or it could be that he's like coming back and forth from the ark, not accomplishing the mission and not able. Noah can't make sense of what the raven not landing teaches him yet.
So, Wes, I have a
Right.
different take on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Different.
Thank you.
Different
We've
vision
been
of
in
it.
a rabbit hole with Michelle here. Yes.
I think I'd like to focus more on answering your original question, the first question you posed, on Noah's behavior.
Okay.
All right, that is an example of how you go from horrible destruction slowly into something, because several times it says, and Noah waited. All right. It's not that the dove comes with the olive leaf and says, okay, that's it. Let's get out. We've been here for 5 months and this has been horrible. Let's go back. I cannot stand this anymore. He waited. It's in modern days will be hopefully, if the hostages are coming back. Yes, it's great, but it's not all celebration, because what they endure there, it's we cannot put into words.
Right.
So it will be slowly, super slowly, if ever they can come back to have a normal life.
Yeah, I really appreciate that note, Elias, that it is to say that it's not, you don't go from flood to post-flood by turning on a switch. It's not like turning on the light or turning on the water faucet. It's a process, and it's slow. In this process, it's at least 21 days, but that's, mathematically 21 days. Metaphorically, it's much longer. And also, I'm still struck with the raven and the dove in terms of the emotional valence of these two birds, and what they mean also in terms of mood and spirit and emotion, because talk to any Israeli, read any Israeli opinion writer, listen to any podcast about Israel. There's so much emotion in the last 2 years, and there's so much emotion now, and there's certainly more joy than there's been in 2 years, but there's also counter reality of emotion of all that has been lost. I think Danny Gordis' column today called it sad joy. I think that was his oxymoron, sad joy. There's a lot of sad joy. There's a lot of emotion. And I wanted to focus on the raven as a symbol of darkness and sadness, which has to be exercised somehow. And then the dove, which is the lighter, more hopeful sign, takes time. It takes 3 iterations of it. I wanted to just invite you guys to think about the Raven poem by Edgar Allan Poe, because I found this poem, so riveting. It speaks to my actual single greatest fear, which is life without Shira. I always wonder about what it's like to be a widow or a widower, where you lose your life partner, and then it's imagine it's winter, it's December, it's dark, it's 4 o'clock, it's cold, it's icy, you're alone, and there's nobody to say, how was your day, dear? And that's what the protagonist in The Raven is. So I'm gonna just read a little bit of it, and I want to invite you to. So the protagonist here is a widower who has lost his wife named Lenore. And then just one other thing: So it's 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. You're all alone. Your wife is gone. Your partner is gone. You have nobody, and you have X more hours until it's nighttime, and even then you can't sleep, and there's no Lenore. And then Joan Didion writes about the year of magical thinking, when you're in such a place of grief that you're open to seeing signs that, oh, that's a sign, oh, that's my dead wife, oh, that's a sign from God and everything, right? It's the what Didion calls the year of magical thinking. You're open to making connections because you're just so sad and you're just so broken and you're just so desperate. So I want to read a little bit of this poem, and then the main thing about the poem, the raven says one word, which is nevermore. That is to say that this brokenness is forever. The hope is nevermore. Joy is nevermore. A different reality is nevermore. I'm just going to read a little bit about it. It goes on, but once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, that's this widower, Lenore's surviving husband, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of some one gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. So you just get the sense of loneliness, of grief, of brokenness, and eventually this is going to spiral into madness. And I just want to just read a few of the parts where the raven is just a symbol that your grief is never going to end. Your brokenness is never going to end. You want a different reality. You want to go from flood to post-flood. Sorry, nevermore. You want something post-flood. Nevermore, nevermore, nevermore. I just want to read a few of these and then react, because it feels to me like this gets at the heart of the Noah story. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And then there's a lot of this 1845 language, but the refrain is the bird is always saying nevermore, and the poor widower, Lenore's husband, ends up just going mad. And the main point is he's stuck forever alone without Lenore. Lenore and nevermore rhyme. So no Lenore, nevermore. He's going to be stuck forevermore with this.
What a depressing story.
So, right. So
but that's where I think actually.
Yeah. So now let's come back to the raven in the Torah.
Right. So that's where I think actually what you called a rabbit hole into the Talmud and Sanhedrin is actually really helpful, because the person who brings this weird story about the raven and his monogamous concern for his raven spouse left there on the ark is actually Reish Lakish, who we spoke about. Reish Lakish is really a symbol in our rabbinic mind of transformation. We spoke about that a couple weeks ago. He's the guy who completely changes his life. And the raven, Noah is missing something when he sends out the raven, because he's not ready for, he's hearing Edgar Allan Poe's Nevermore, right? This is evil. This is bad. I'm sending that away. And he doesn't, at least I think, according to this very strange Reish Lakish story, he doesn't understand the possibility that even the raven holds for his own transformation.
So let's talk about this note of nevermore as Edgar Allan Poe brings it. So sad it is, obviously so sad. What's its resonance for Israel and Gaza now? What's the voice of nevermore? What's the voice of the raven that just sits there, nevermore, 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 about Israel now and about Gaza now?
I mean, I think we've been there for the last 2 years.
I think Elias already said it. It's the idea that that no matter, and then you go this is comment, the oxymoron. It's just, even though there could be some joy in bringing back the 20 remaining hostages of the hundreds that were taken, what real joy is there? What real joy is that? There is some need, there is some sense of celebration, maybe a slight return to some kind of normality, but it's always going to be there. It's the same way that we mark Tisha B'Av and Shiva Sabbat Tammuz and Yom HaShoah. There's always going to be
that, right. So that Raven and that Edgar Allan Poe, I think that's the beating heart of this issue, which is, back in the days before October 7th, there was that horrible metaphor that was used a lot, which is, when Israel had all these wars with Gaza, mowing the lawn, mowing the lawn, mowing the lawn. There's just always going to be another war. We got to mow the lawn, and then we'll go back to life until we had October 7th. And the nevermore, that Raven, the despondency is, this was a bad flare-up, but in the end, nothing is really going to change. And you have two peoples fighting for one land, and they can't make it work, and therefore, nevermore, nevermore, nevermore will we ever have peace. And that's there. And even now, if you listen to the pundits, who, like, including the Daily, the Daily had a person talk about how the President Trump's 20-point peace plan came to be, and then the question that the Daily host asked today on October the 10th was, are you hopeful? And the expert basically gave nevermore the Raven answer, which is, well, they've been fighting each other for a good long time, and et cetera. So I think, but now the story doesn't end with the Raven. The story ends with the dove. But I think the Raven is a helpful sign of what we have to battle with.
Yeah, I think that in what's going on in Israel this day, my take will be comparing with the Raven is that to a certain point, it's hard to trust the Raven, okay, because of the nature of the bird. So the question becomes, suppose that in the best case scenario, they achieve peace and the hostages are back. Remember how many stories we heard right after October 7 of people in the kibbutzim
trusting and building.
They used to bring,
right.
the Palestinians that were workers there, they would take them to the hospitals, and then they were the first ones that got killed.
Right.
So that trust, I don't know if it will ever come back.
Yeah, that's the nevermore, right?
But
Oded
then,
Lifshitz, who drove Palestinians to the doctor's appointments.
But
he's 85. He's murdered.
And then
nevermore,
surprisingly, you hear relatives of dead people in the Nova Festival who said, I don't want revenge. I want healing. Those are the doves.
So, right.
So it's you have both, and it's I don't know.
And what do you make of, on the doves, let's pivot to doves. We're happy to talk about doves. What do you make of the fact that in the Noah story, there's these 3 iterations? The dove is sent out 3 times with 7 days in between each one. What do you make of that?
Is that an over Raven going around?
Yes. What do you make of? I mean, what's the resonance of even the dove is not turning on a light switch? It's 3 different times.
Well, I think partially this the number 3 is a sign of a covenant of some kind. That we do things in threes as a Jewish tradition. The raven is gone once, and then the dove 3 times. So, and the idea that the dove, keeps coming back also shows the sense that there's a connection between, in a sense, between the raven and the dove, in the sense that we have darkness, but then we have light. The light and the goodness of the raven, of the dove, coming back 3 times, shows that we have a longer connection with the good than with the evil.
Look, the dove is as complex as the raven because it is one of the, there are 7 of them apparently on the ark. It's much more expendable, but it also there's a an extra word when we're talking about the dove, which is mi'ito. Noah sends it out from him, and it seems to reflect some willingness to kind of hope or grow or see a little bit more in the world that he didn't have with the raven and the time of the raven. And I don't know what to make of it, because I think that's really full of complexity. And of course, doves are symbols of peace, both for good and for naive, right? But the dove, like reaching out to the dove, has this double-sided nature of like, well, okay, but there are a lot of them. Maybe I can afford this risk. Right. And this sense of like, I'm gonna send something that matters to me and give a little bit more of my own soul into the possibility of hope.
Yeah, but also is the factor that, it's a matter of suppose that we are all born, even animals are born with conscience, all right? And the raven has no gratitude to Noah. Noah saves, its life. For 5 months they are there. The first opportunity it goes out. That's it. Goodbye. I've never seen you before. All right. And the dove comes back. More loyalty and more appreciation for what Noah has done.
Yeah, so I want to come back to one of your initial insights, Michelle, which is about how this story ends for Noah, right? So he's in the flood for however long it is, 150 days, 4 days, whatever. He sends out the raven, the dove 3 times. At long last, the flood is over. We're in a changed world and in a new world. And famously, he gets drunk, he drinks too much. Famously, he does some kind of sexual impropriety. And famously, his family, which survived the flood, ends in curses and imprecations and tension. Okay? So really a breakdown. In the end, a breakdown. I guess my question is, what do we learn from this story about Noah post-flood that could advise us, both Israelis and Palestinians, how to avoid that kind of a crash and burn and to achieve better peaceful result?
Why don't you answer your own question?
Well,
it's hard to elaborate here.
Yeah, so I want to just say, I think what's new about this moment, based on what I've heard from every Israeli I've ever heard talk about it, is that Israel could never get to post-traumatic stress because they were never post-October 7th. Right, that
post-traumatic growth.
No, they were never post-trauma. Yeah. They were never like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder posits that you're that whatever trauma happened, you're after it, you're beyond it, and now you can heal from it. And what I heard every Israeli that I ever heard about this say is it's still October 7th for us because of the hostages. As long as there are hostages still in the hell of Gaza's tunnels, and as long as there are families here still unable to locate them, it's still October 7th. For them, October 7th lasted 2 years and 5 days. And therefore, they could never heal. And what this moment portends is they can finally get post-trauma. For those who are alive, can get rejoined with their family. For those who passed away, can get a proper burial and begin to mourn in a way that they couldn't when all that was unresolved and their loved ones, living and dead, were not back home. And the question I have is, so this feels like a very fraught moment, that changing the reality is not only ravens and doves, it's about dealing with kind of infinite pain. And there's so many ways to get it wrong. Alcohol is a way to get it wrong. Bad sex is a way to get it wrong. Fighting with your own family and with your own people is a way to get it wrong. And all of those menaces are adverted to at the end of the Noah's Ark story. So I think, in a way, I guess my thinking is that this weekend, please God, they get home, but then the real work of healing just begins.
Yeah. One of the challenges in this story is that you don't make peace with the doves, right? The doves go out and they find an opportunity, and we have this beautiful vision of doves, but there's a really interesting coda in the Midrash Rabbah that the raven actually redeems itself from this original story in the story of Elijah, that the raven actually comes and on its own accord will bring food and sustenance to Elijah. And there's a transformation of this great evil in the
Right.
world into a potential for healing and hope. That is, I think, so emblematic of the moment that we're in. It's not how do we make peace with the doves, but how do we imagine that there could be peace someday with ravens?
Mm. Well, I want to end by just offering what I think has been the most resonant teaching that I've heard this year at Temple Manual, and I think it's a story that the Jewish people just needs to hear and internalize. When he was here a couple of years ago, Daniel Hartman pointed out that all the Jewish world is most indebted to the survivor generation who lost everything and then rebuilt their lives. And of course, we have known that in the form of our beloved survivors like Hannah and Baruch, may they rest in peace, like Magda, may she continue till 120 and beyond, people who lost everything and rebuilt. But on last week, on Thursday night before Ne'ilah, Larry talked about his mother, who at the age of 19 had lost everything and everybody that was near and dear to her. And she came to America and rebuilt her life. And somehow she did it without bitterness and without anger. And she was very intentional about that. And she said, Hitler already took everything from me. And if I live with anger and bitterness, he'll take that too. So my best revenge is living well. And then she created this world for her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren where they could thrive. And to me, that's what health and success and blessing looks like here. To get out of the past and into a better future, it just takes that kind of a will that Larry talked about and that his mother embodied. And I hear just so many people say, that's what we need now. So please, God, may that happen now. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, everybody.